did you know that I can estimate, well, somebody I'll say it's me, can estimate how long you'll live based on a picture of you? There are researchers who have accurately estimated a person's lifespan based on a picture of them. Now, the way they did this is they actually gathered up a bunch of baseball cards, baseball players' rookie cards of their first season in the league. And they basically broke them into 3 groups. And they discovered that one group substantially outlived the other groups. And this isn't a joke, this is actually a real research study. Is that, what do you think that they divided the cards up by? How did they create their categories? By smile. They looked at the rookie cards of a bunch of baseball players, and they broke them into 3 categories. One category was those who had a kind of a great big smile. The other extreme were those with little or no smile, and then there was kind of a middle category. Those who had a great big smile lived on average to be 80 years old. Those with almost no smile, or no smile, lived on average to be about 73 years old. And even when you bring in other factors like things that create health risks like smoking and so forth, across all of those cohorts, those who smiled lived on average 7 years longer than those who didn't. So it would appear that there is a correlation to happiness and how long we live. So as we continue our series today, Back to Basics, I wanted to talk a little bit about this idea of happiness. Because when we look at the Christmas season, we know that the Christmas season is something that is so easy to miss. Right? If you've been alive for, more than like a year, right? That as Christmas comes, man, it is so easy to get caught up in everything. And Christmas comes and goes by and you never really experience it. Or maybe your experience of it isn't very pleasant because of all the hustle, bustle, responsibilities, all those sort of things. And it's very easy to miss the real meaning of Christmas, right? That God, in the form of Jesus, came to earth to connect us with him. That he said, I'm literally willing to give all I have to be in relationship with you. So as part of that idea of kind of really connecting into the Christmas season, we have Advent, right? The 4 Sundays preceding Christmas, where we focus on different themes. Our theme last week was hope. Our theme this week is joy. Now, what is joy? Well, if you look it up, Webster will tell you that joy is happiness, or one of the definitions is felicity, which I had to look up. I thought it was a TV show, right? But it turns out felicity is extreme happiness. And the thing about it is that although happiness and joy are largely synonyms, I have found that in practice, people often view joy as something a bit deeper than just happiness. That happiness kind of comes and goes, but joy is this thing that kind of seems to stick around. That people who have joy can go through life not always happy. Sometimes really heavy, hard things happen. But there's a sense of wellness, a sense of stability, a sense of it's going to be okay. It sticks around. So if those kind of feelings, having joy, having happiness, will help us live longer, it seems like we should all want to be pretty happy. So the question is, how can we be happy people? Well, that's kind of a bad news, good news situation. Because researchers tell us that about 50% of our happiness comes from factors we can't control. Genetics, inherent traits you have. Like, for example, self-confident people tend to be happier people. Outgoing people tend to be happier people. Now, that's the bad news side, but that's only 50%, which means there's another 50% that we do control. We actually have the ability to become happier people, but we have to choose to do it. The thing is that when we're feeling unhappy, the things that we tend to reach towards to make us happy are rarely the things that actually work. For example, we often think that circumstantial things will make us happier. If I just made more money, I'd be happy. If I got that cool car, or that piece of jewelry, or that high-end watch, then I would be happy. But there's actually a really powerful human trait that makes that not work. Human beings are incredibly adaptable. We adapt to our conditions pretty quickly. And so what ends up happening is that, well, once you have enough money where your bills are paid, if you can't pay your bills, more money definitely helps, right? But once you can pay your bills and you're kind of okay, making more money will make you happy for a very short period of time. But then you adapt, and that becomes just your money. So now you need more money to be happy, and that cycle continues. Or things like the fancy car or the big piece of jewelry or the kind of crazy high-end watch. So you spend too much money on a watch, and you're really excited the first day you wear it. And after that, what is it? It's just your watch. It tells time just like the $30 Timex does, sort of thing. So circumstantial stuff doesn't happen. But what about life events? Sometimes we look towards life events to make us happy. If I get a promotion at work, will that automatically make me happy? Well, it's kind of good because there's some good things that come with it. But also, I get more responsibility. I might be responsible for other people, which is going to have its own issues. Or having children. All of you have had children. Were you happy all the time once you had your children? Yeah. We know better. But although it's a happy thing and there are happy times, it doesn't make you automatically happy. It turns out, though, it is funny that there is actually one life event that does correlate pretty well to the factors we associate with happiness. It's actually marriage. Research shows that, if you're happily married, not happily married, it actually impacts the factors we associate with happiness. In fact, you know what you call someone who's happily married? A man, actually. Oh, come on, that's kind of funny. Come on. That was like my second biggest joke of the morning. Come on. But what's funny, it's actually not a joke. That research shows that if you compare single men to married men, in virtually everything we can track, length of their life, quality of life, success at work, money they make, married men will outperform single men whether or not it's a happy marriage. Men doesn't seem to matter. I think we probably just get a pretty good deal all along, sort of thing. But it turns out for women, it does matter. That if you take a happily married woman, compared her to a single woman, she will perform well in all of those factors, just like a man does. But if you take a woman who's in an unhappy marriage and compare it to a single woman, she will actually do less well than the single person. So if you're a woman, you want to be really careful about who you marry. But if you're a man, like anyone will do, right? Well, whatever the reasons for all that is, we don't want to just lean on the fact of whether or not we're married to make us happy. The reality is that if we really want to be happy, it has to be something that we choose. That we have to say, you know what? I'm going to have a good day today. That I'm going to intentionally experience things differently. That I'm going to actually try to be what some people call a good finder. That when you look around, so often there's a natural tendency to look for everything that's wrong in this situation, for everything that's missing, for everything that's not right. But good finders don't do that. Good finders find the good in every situation. You think about like at Christmas time. You're inviting a whole bunch of people over to your house, and there's one couple who can't make it. You've got two choices. You can bemoan the one couple who didn't make it, or you could have joy with all the people who showed up and be happy they're all here. And to take it to its largest extreme, maybe you and your spouse invited a whole bunch of people over, and there's a snowstorm and no one came over. You can be sad about the fact that no one came over, or you can say, wow, we don't get much time at home alone together. What a great chance to be at home alone together. So fundamentally, it's our outlook. That is the thing that we can most control, that most impacts our quality of life. So what it means then is that if we will choose to be happy people, if we will choose to find positive things, if we will choose to be joyful, it means we have a better life And since we know happiness leads to a longer life, we have a better life that lasts longer. And it turns out that the ancient book of Proverbs actually says something very much like this. It actually says that a joyful heart makes a cheerful face. But when the heart is sad, the spirit is broken. When you are happy, when you are joyful, it literally flows out of you. It changes your entire experience of the world and even affects the people around you. But when we're down and we're sad, it all feels broken. It all feels like we just can't make it work. And so as we get closer to Christmas, this idea of choosing to have a positive outlook becomes more and more important. Because the reality is that big holidays like Christmas, and Christmas might be the biggest one of these, magnifies all of our emotions. We can get really, really happy, or we can get really, really down. And one of the biggest factors in that is our expectations for Christmas. How many of us have had incredibly unrealistic expectations for that one day when it was all going to be perfect on this one day? Yes, my two brothers hate each other and they get fist fights every time they see each other, but not this Christmas. They're not going to do it this Christmas. I mean, sure, it's an open bar at my house, but sure, nothing's going to go wrong. Right? It's about having realistic expectations, right? There's nothing wrong with being hopeful. We want to be hopeful. We want things to be good. But don't try to pack too much into it. Because as we try to overload the day that we call Christmas, we become at risk of missing what it really means. Because I think what we find is that there is so much reason for joy in Christmas. If we look at what we celebrate on Christmas Day, and we look at who Jesus is, and what he was here to do, and who he came for, there are so many reasons for joy. Now, the reading we have this morning comes from the gospel writer Luke. And I especially like Luke's gospel, because Luke was different than the other gospel writers. Unlike some of the other gospel writers, Luke had never met Jesus, never met him in person. Luke traveled with the Apostle Paul, and what we gather from reading Luke's gospel is that there was a lot of things flowing around about what happened during Jesus' life. And Luke actually tells, if you actually start at the beginning of his gospel, he actually says that, there's all this stuff we've been hearing. So I wanted to find out what was true, put it all together, and write it down so we can know what was true. So what Luke did is he actually took it upon himself to start this kind of big research project. And we think that it's possible that some wealthy person actually financed this effort. We don't know that for sure, but we tend to think that. Someone who really wanted to know what happened. So what Luke did is he actually went out and he started interviewing people. Because the Gospel of Luke was written somewhere between the year 60 and the year 85. And so it was written at a time that there would still be people around who had been alive when it all went down. We figure that Jesus died somewhere between the year 30 and 35. So he could go out and talk to people who were there. Some who might have been adults and now are much older, people who were young children who are now adults. And he could say, what did you see and what did you experience? What was going on in all that time? And he did all that so we could know what actually happened on that day. Now, as we look at Luke's account, it's really interesting to look at it in the light of what we read last week. Remember that last week, our theme was hope, being hopeful. And we actually read from the gospel writer John. And when we looked at John's gospel, there was something that John wanted us to know. He wanted us to know who Jesus is. And what John tells us is that Jesus is the very creator of the world. That if you look at the way he opens his gospel, he says that all was created through Jesus, that Jesus is God. All was created through him. There was nothing that was created that was not created by him. So what John wanted us to know was that the one who came to save us is the one who actually created life in the first place, created the cosmos in the first place. But now if Jesus is the creator of the world, the creator of all things, we might expect the circumstances of his birth to be consistent with, the greatest of all time showing up. But as we look at what Luke tells us, the circumstances of Jesus' birth doesn't look anything like that. Right? What Luke tells us says there were shepherds living out in the fields nearby, keeping watch over their flocks at night. An angel of the Lord appeared to them, and the glory of the Lord shone around them, and they were terrified. And what he's doing here for us is he's painting a picture. What he wants us to know is that these are real people that he's spoken to, that these aren't two-dimensional characters. These are people who are out doing a job. And keep in mind that shepherds worked kind of well outside the kind of town borders. So they're kind of out in these open pastures. It's going to be incredibly dark. And when he talks to them, they tell him that we were just out doing our thing, and all of a sudden someone shows up that we determine is an angel because there's this, what they call the glory of the Lord, which I don't know what that looks like. I assume it's this huge, overwhelming light is certainly how I picture it. And he said, you know what? We didn't think it was good news. We were afraid. Because what else would they think? But what's kind of interesting, though, is that the angel shows up to shepherds. And it's important to understand how shepherds were looked at. Shepherds were largely outcasts. Most people did not want their kids to grow up to be shepherds because you didn't really get to connect with society much. You worked really long hours. Yeah, it was very low paying. You probably just kind of got you got fed. Largely is how you got paid for your job. You weren't really part of society. You were just kind of out there working with other shepherds all the time. In fact, in some circumstances, shepherds were considered untrustworthy and sometimes weren't even allowed to testify in court because they were considered untrustworthy. So, what is the angel here to do? Luke tells us. So the angel said to them, "Do not be afraid. I bring you good news that will cause great joy for all the people. Today in the town of David, a Savior has been born to you. He is the Messiah, the Lord." So the angel has shown up to announce the coming Messiah to shepherds, to outcasts, to those that are not accepted. If this is the coming Messiah, I mean, who should he be telling, right? Keep in mind that in the first century, they had been looking for the Messiah for centuries, waiting for him to come. And so if the Messiah has finally got here, should it be announced to the royalty, to the kings, to the emperors, or at least to the religious leaders? This is the guy you've been looking for. But that's not who the announcement was made to. The shepherds, the outsiders, the unaccepted. The reason that the announcement was made to them is found in the announcement itself. I bring you good news that will cause great joy for all the people. The gift of Christmas is that the creator of all things did not come for the special people. He came for everyone. He came to be everyone's Savior. In a time where there were so many rules about religion, in a time where people were convinced that it was so hard to be acceptable to God, Jesus shows up and says, you know what? It doesn't matter what your mistakes are. It doesn't matter what your issues are, what your addictions are, what all those things that might be holding you down. Those things don't matter. I showed up for you. That's the gift that comes with Christmas. That's the hope that Jesus brought, that it is a salvation and a renewal that's available for all people. And what's so important for us to remember is that this announcement that was proclaimed at his birth, that he had come for all people, wasn't just made then forgotten. It was actually something Jesus carried forward throughout his entire ministry, that he was constantly talking to the people that others ignored, especially the religious people, especially the good people. The ones that everyone else ignored, he went to. In fact, later, Luke documents for us in Jesus' life as an adult, says that tax collectors and other notorious sinners often came to listen to Jesus teach. Now, you probably know tax collectors were largely considered traitors. They were Jewish people who were being paid by Rome to collect taxes from their own people on behalf of Rome. So they were some of the most hated people around. And I love that other one, other notorious sinners. You're not just a sinner, you're a notorious sinner. And what that probably meant is they were just people who didn't live according to the religious guidelines, the religious rules. And these were all the people that everyone else ignored. And Jesus constantly seeked them out. And Jesus would share the same message with everyone. If you feel ignored, if you feel outside, if you feel disconnected, if you feel forgotten, if you feel like there's something that's got such a hold of you that you can't break free from it, I came for you. Whether you're hurting, lonely, or addicted, I came for you. And the thing is, where the good people, the religious people, ignored his message, got angered by his message, these folks ate it up because they were finding life, a new kind of life. In fact, Jesus would go on to say that as you look around your life and you're unhappy, there are going to be things that you are drawn to that you think are going to make you happy, but they're not going to make you happy. They're going to tear you down. There's another way to be happy. The way Jesus put it is the thief comes only to steal and kill and destroy. I have come that they may have life and have it to the full. As we look at things like money or circumstance or position to make us happy, we find they never do make us happy. In fact, if we're not careful, they become this thing that we chronically chase. That not only does it make us happy, but begins to hold us down. Jesus said, I came so you could have life. And I love the way he puts this. He didn't come so we could have life that was based on rules or religion or restrictions. He came so we could have a life that is full, a life that is meaningful, a life that is purposeful, a life that is hopeful, a life that can be joyful if we'll embrace what he's given to us. That's the gift of Christmas Day. That's the joy we received on Christmas Day. That in this relationship of faith where we're not trying to earn it, we're not trying to be good enough, because what's good enough even mean, right? Instead, a relationship of faith. Jesus says, I want you in my family. That if you will put your faith in me, you are part of my family. And in that, you will find a life that is renewed. Not just waiting for one day when you die and go to heaven, but a life that changes now. As Jesus often talked about the kingdom of God, that this presence of God moves close to us. And for those who put their faith in Jesus, Jesus tells us the actual power of God dwells within us. As he promised the Helper, the Holy Spirit, the actual presence of God dwelling within us if we will actually put our faith in who he is. And the promise in that is that as we embrace that power within us, it gives us a power to actually look for the good in every situation when things are holding us down. And if you've ever had something that has gotten a hold of you and you can't break free from it, but you've gotten to the other side, you start to see how God brings us through that. As we embrace the presence of Jesus, how he brings us through it. But the thing is, as we embrace this power, it's not just about making our own lives better. It's not just about us being able to find the good, but we also get to be the good, to bring hope and purpose and opportunity to other people when we share it. When we embrace the message of Jesus, what Christmas really means, we get a joy in our own life that enriches our lives, gives us a fuller life, and allows us to give that opportunity to other people if we're willing to share it with them. And I encourage all of us to be willing to share it. And as I say this time of year, each year, there is no time of the year that is easier to share it than now. It's Christmas. Ask people to come to church with you. What was my challenge last week? Who remembers last week's challenge? Invite how many people? 2 people. Invite 2 people. And we even have 2 services. You can go to 2 services if you want, or you can bring them both to one. That's fine too. But I encourage you to really invite people out. Because if our faith is just our own, we're not really making the most of it. And I want to be really clear about that. We're not meant to badger people. I don't believe we're meant to be out there trying to convert people, sort of thing. But what I think we are meant to do is say that there's something in my life that makes a difference in my life. Would you like to come just check it out? And on Christmas Eve, invite someone to come check it out. We do fun things. We do slightly different things at both services. Same message. As I always say, you could come at whatever time it works for you, but a better thing to do would be come at whatever time works for your guest instead. Be willing to go to a different service if someone would join you in it. Because the thing that we want to remember is that joy and the sense of happiness and this lasting sense of purpose are not really things that we can experience if we just hold on to them. But if we will look at what happens with Christmas, if we look at the one who is entitled to everything, Jesus, exercised none of that entitlement, instead gave everything to connect us to him and to the Father. The way we can be most like him and most joyful is to share what we have with those around us. I truly believe that if we will embrace that, we get to be part of something bigger than ourselves that fills us beyond ourselves.